Yeah, I realized, I don't know, I had like a brain fart like it was gonna be live and I had food in my mouth, but then it's not, so who cares? I
Thought
don't
you
know
were just
why I did that.
vomiting a little bit.
No, I was like, I had food in my mouth.
It's
Yeah,
purging.
I
Yeah.
could have just ate, but I forgot this is not live. I don't know, whatever. It's like hard to. I'm all like backward because it's Friday. I feel like weirdly,
Yeah, I
like
know.
it did kind of like throw things off.
We could introduce like a body horror segment where we start, yeah, we just, yeah, okay, sorry. Okay.
You know what? It's funny. I was just
Yeah.
saying to someone. I was saying to someone. I think yesterday. I got an email about the 20th anniversary of Hostel, the movie. Like
Mm.
they're releasing the
Yeah.
DVDs, and I think it's like one of the only movies that I actively hate. Like I think the world got worse when that movie came out. Like I saw that movie and I wanted to die. I was like, what sick bastard made this fucking movie where you see people getting hurt like this? Anyway.
Hey, I'm Josh Kovensky, and I'm joined today by Joe Ragazzo for the TPM Social Club. How's it going, Joe?
It's going good, Josh. How are you?
Good. Joe, in some ways, you are a philosopher king, or at least a philosopher publisher manager
Yes.
at Talking Points Memo.
I have asked Josh to make that my title, and he won't let me be the philosopher king of TPM. But I do love me some philosophy, which is why today we have a guest who is important to me, Dr. David Kyle Johnson from King's College in Pennsylvania. Um, this one is, it's kind of fun. It's kind of funny to me that I'm like a huge fan of a professor who like just teaches in Pennsylvania, but I watch his courses and I've learned a lot from him. I like his style of presentation, and his specialty is like metaphysics and logic. And I love those things. So this episode, we talk uh, a lot about what the role of a philosopher should even be, because this is a question I have wondered a lot. You read books and you read history books and you hear about these philosophers who are kind of like making the world, like moving the world forward, right? In America, we hear about John Locke constantly and all these people. And here we are in a time when it seems like a lot of philosophical questions are being asked by everyone. Like, what are we doing? What's the point of life? What is a person? What is, like, how does consciousness work with AI? And the question I have is like, where are the philosophers, right? Like, why am I hearing from tech people about these questions? And so it was fun to be able to talk to Kyle about what he thinks, because he is a real philosopher who teaches students and everything, publishes papers, does all
Yeah,
of it.
he's a real life philosopher. Um, in the flesh, I should have called him Kyle. I made the mistake of calling him David, so I regret that. But hopefully we can develop an ethical framework in which I can be forgiven and redeemed. But yeah, he was great. It was really cool to hear something from somebody who's really trying to like apply these really abstract questions to day-to-day life. That was really, really interesting.
I didn't realize one thing I learned over the course of this podcast is that you're a Star Trek guy. I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, I love. I'm a huge fan of Next Generation. If it's probably the number one show I still watch, just to like, if I want to just like, if there's nothing, I can't find anything I want to watch, I just want to like sort of relax, then it's the easiest thing to just put on. Like, I really am a huge fan. And it's also a show that, kind of proceeds by like, each episode is like a mini morality tale.
Mm.
And it is really interesting that the whole kind of show, like not just Next Generation, but like the original series and like, Deep Space Nine, the ones that kind of came after, um they sort of like track like where the country is. Like Next Generation came out in the 80s and early 90s, and it's very optimistic. Like they're out there like exploring the universe, and like the idea is that humanity basically achieves like communism. Like that's like the universe in which it's set. So there's no money, and everybody has like everything they could ever want. You just make, if you want like a delicious meal, you just like create it in this like uh apparator machine. I forget what they call it. Anyway, but then the series that come out kind of into the 90s and the 2000s are all just like darker and darker. The morality is much more ambiguous. So it sort of like follows like American history in that way. But it's I really, really love it. It's a great show. We could do an episode about Star Trek and I would not stop talking.
We might, let's put a pin in that, because like it might be
Yeah.
fun if I'm watching it for the first time to kind of like talk to you about it as a mate. That could be like a cool like side pod or something like that. I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's a different topic than this.
Patrick Stewart is not dead yet. So we
That's
maybe
true.
book him. So
Yeah. All right. Well, we hope you really enjoy the episode. Also, if you're not a member yet, just be a member. Go buy a membership for TPM. If you don't subscribe to the YouTube page, please, what are you doing? Just subscribe to the YouTube page. And have a good day and enjoy the episode. Talk to you later.
Bye, guys.
All right. Welcome to the Social Club. I'm here with my co-host, as always, Josh Kavensky, and we are joined by Kyle Johnson, professor of philosophy at King's College, Pennsylvania. Kyle, how are you doing today?
Hi, Joe. Hi, Josh. It's great to meet you guys. I'm doing great. It's Friday here in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And the weather's nice outside, and I'm really excited to have this conversation.
I am extremely excited for you to be here. For the listening audience, Kyle has a series of lectures on the great courses, multiple series that I have watched on metaphysics, on sci-fi, and big questions in philosophy. I highly recommend you check those out if you have not. He also has a textbook coming out. Kyle, it's about science, right? The
It's
philosophy of
called
science.
How parentheses why and when to think scientifically.
Yes.
You could think of it as a philosophy of science book, but it's actually a textbook for a science, like how to think scientifically class, basically, right? At King's, we give it to our non-science majors, but everybody needs to take it. It's for it because it corrects misunderstandings about it. We could talk all about that, but yeah, how, why, and when to think scientifically.
So I want to start here because I'm really interested to talk to you because I feel like right now in the political discourse where Josh and I spend most of our time, that philosophy is like right in the center of it, right? Philosophical question. And then obviously philosophy and politics are always intertwined. They go hand in hand in some way. But I mean, like sort of the deep metaphysical questions, like what is a person? What is consciousness? Like what is AI? All these things. And so it makes me curious about how you as a actual philosopher view the role of the philosopher in the 21st century. Like what should you be doing? And the reason I asked that, and maybe the audience is like, what does that even mean, Joe? Is because I feel like there's this idea of philosophers kind of like in the ivory tower thinking, right, and not like in the arena, so to speak. And I'm just curious how you think about that, because it does seem like philosophy is like front and center in our discourse in a way that maybe it's recency bias, but it feels different than in the past. And so I'm curious how you think about that.
Yeah, except for like it feels like philosophy itself is in the center,
yes,
but like I don't think philosophers are in the center.
Right.
Exactly. Right. So like in your email you had mentioned that like the public intellectuals that people are turning to are more like historians, right? Like Timothy Snyder and Heather Cox Richardson, right? Which are both great. Like I read Snyder's book whenever I was writing on fascism, and I listened to Richardson every night when I'm walking my dogs. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think they have become more prominent like the last 10 years because people are starting to suspect that history is repeating itself. And so they're wanting historians to put it in context and figure out what's really going on. Right. Which is great. But there's not any philosophers that are like front and center talking about philosophy and trying to make sense of, what's going on in the world. Right. There is Jack Russell Weinstein, who has the podcast Why, which is part of the Philosophy in Public Life. Like he has an organization called Philosophy in Public Life, and so they're trying to bring philosophy kind of to the common person, to the public or whatever, which is great. Like obviously, but I had to Google that, right? Like I didn't know about that. I had to Google that for this conversation when I was talking about what philosophers are trying to do this, and like nobody's turning to that podcast on a regular basis, like they turn to Snyder or Richardson to make sense of what's going on in the world, right? I wish they would, but like they're not, right? And it's not that this has always been the case, right? Philosophers have been front and center for a lot of major historical events, right? Locke influenced the founding fathers. John Stuart Mill was a very public philosopher who, as far as I understand it, influenced Lincoln and his thinking about slavery and civil war, that kind of stuff. I mean, who do we have now that's doing this, right? Like Chomsky, he's more kind of known for his linguistic work, right? Peter Singer. I mean, again, these are important thinkers. Peter's utilitarianism. People aren't going to Singer to understand what's going on in the world, right? I honestly, and this may just be me being naive. the closest thing I can think of a public philosopher that people like, that have lots of listeners, that people go to, that are like, that is really addressing things that people care about and are making sense of the world, is Adam Conover. Do you know who Adam Conover is?
Is that it's Adam
Yeah.
hates everything, right? Is
Yeah,
that
like,
what it
yeah,
showed?
Adam ruins everything.
Adam ruins
Adam
everything.
Yeah, he's like a
ruins
comedian.
Yeah, he's a comedian. I say philosopher because he has an undergraduate bachelor's philosophy degree. He does not have a
Interesting. I did not know
PhD,
that.
but he does have some philosophical training. I believe he wrote his like senior thesis on free will or something like that, like if I remember correctly. And I love his podcast. He's got a podcast called, oh crap, now I forgot it. Sorry, Adam, if you're watching this. I listen to your podcast all the time, but right now it's floating outside my head. It's called Factually. That's why instead of actually, it's Factually.
Okay.
And he interviews a lot of different really important intellectuals about really important stuff. And I've come across some really important stuff on there. In fact, I want to talk about libertarianism later. That's where I first heard about it, is on Conover's podcast, right? But he's not a PhD. He's not technically like a professional philosopher, right? So like, where are we all at? What are we doing here? Interestingly, while I was researching, kind of, when we went to talk about this, I found an article from Philosophy Now back in 2019 by John Lakes. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Lachs. That was literally called "Can Philosophy Still Produce Public Philosophers?" And he was kind of arguing that we don't, because we discourage it. We discourage like what we reward and who we give, the acolytes to, and give the big special presentations at the APA and that kind of stuff, is people who do really specialized work and for other philosophers. So we're all having this conversation with ourselves, but we're not reaching outside at the ivory tower or whatever, right? And that's who we're rewarding. We have no recognition or accolades or, like, for people who do the kind of things that I do, which I'm trying to reach out to the public and bring, philosophy to the public, right? It's just kind of frowned upon. Some philosophers either think that they don't have anything useful to say because philosophy doesn't have any answers or whatever. I think that's false, but some people have that impression, even philosophers. Or they're so highfalutin, they think that talking to the public is beneath them, and so they don't approach, right? Right? We're often not trained for it. We're trained to argue amongst ourselves. We're not trained to bring things to the public,
But
right?
why, David? Why do you think it's so rarefied? I mean, why is it that this stuff is like, you need like a comedian like Adam Conover to be the one who's going to kind of translate?
Yeah, well, I think it relates to what I was just saying, right? Like, so I mean, part of the reason it's rarefied is because we have this perverse incentive structure. A lot of philosophers don't think that they're capable of doing it. A lot of them actually aren't, because they're not trained for it, right? And so I know some people are just afraid of it. And so, like, I mean, this is one reason, like, God, this sounds so self-serving. I'm very sorry. But like, not only am I a PhD philosopher, like, I have a lot of theater background. I've been in numerous like theater productions and that kind of stuff. I was in speech and debate in high school. I was a state champion in both. Like I'm a fairly decent public speaker. That a lot of that I owe to, right, by the way, my high school speech teacher, Michael Patterson. We called him Matt. He was the greatest. Like, and some people would say I still talk a bit like him. And because I got a lot of my job, but like I have that kind of training, or that's why I can do great courses and that kind of stuff in a fairly effectual way, I hope, right? And a lot of philosophers are not trained for that. They're not able to do that, right? And so I think people are reluctant to do that. So I wish we would change our incentive structure. I wish the APA would have like a whole section for public philosophy, and have, keynotes by people who, kind of make that their raison d'etre. That would be really great. I don't expect that to happen, but, that would be very nice. And then maybe we would have more of us that are doing this kind of thing. But this is why I think if we should be doing it more. This is why I do great courses. This is why I write textbooks about how to think scientifically. It's why I do blogs. That's why I appear on podcasts, right?
It reminds me, like, when I was in college, I got to a point where I was like, all right, I'm either gonna do journalism, which I obviously ended up doing, or I'm gonna go to graduate school to be a philosophy professor. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know if I just was a bad student, but I remember thinking, like, this stuff, the analytic philosophy, is so in the weeds that I don't even I don't know what I would even do. Like, I was so confused about like what I would contribute to the discourse and then what that would contribute to the world that I kind of like shied away from it. And I don't know if that's like if that's like a product of the education I got, specifically like the classes I took. I wasn't sure which direction to go. But I remember, but then I watched like your courses or Massimo's on Stoicism, and
Yeah.
there's just so much more connected to like making the world a better place than at least a lot of the philosophy I studied. And I guess what I'm leading up to is I wonder if how much of the current subject matter that is in vogue in philosophy, like what people are studying, contributes to the fact that they're not really studying the kinds of things that the public wants to hear about, right? Like they're like
Yes.
they're specialized, like you said.
So some of it is, right? So one of your questions, like to kind of set this up, is like, what are philosophers talking about these days?
Yeah.
And a certain kind of way, I was just like, I don't know, that's not how I do philosophy, right? Like, I'm not in the weeds on all these weird academic debates that are, that are happening. I shouldn't say weird academic debates, because some of them are really important. But like, because I'm more of a public philosopher. Like, I've spent the last 2 years working on this book and this course, right? Neither of which is a journal article, right?
Right.
And so, let me say a couple of different things, and I'll say about, so I'll say some things about what's going wrong and then kind of what's going right. So,
Yeah.
when you ask about this, I was reminded of one of the first things that I was asked to do when I got a job in philosophy was summarize some old APA presidential addresses from the 60s for a collection that was being done, right? It was like 2006, so I think they were doing like a 20th century collection or something along that line, right? And one that always stuck with me, although I had to look it up because it's been a while or whatever, but it's always kind of stuck with me in my brain, was what it was Ernest Moody's 1964 address, The Age of Analysis. And long story short, what he said was he chastised the philosophers of the 60s. Basically, again, I'm paraphrasing, right? But basically saying, like, it's the middle of the Cold War. We are all in danger of being annihilated by, nuclear bombs and whatever. The world is in chaos, and like there's like real trouble. The 60s was pretty tumultuous times, right? And we're busy talking about language and about like what names refer to, and like we're knee deep in linguistics and what words mean, and like that's not helping anybody out, right? I don't remember exactly when it came out, but like when I think about that, I think of like, Saul Kripke's Naming and Necessity, which is a really important book in philosophy of language, but it doesn't affect the average person, I would argue,
Yeah.
in any kind of like realistic way, right? And in that, he quoted another APA address from like the 40s that was after the Second World War. That was like, so do we just go back to what we were doing before the World War, whatever, talking about logical positivism and stuff like that? Like, we need to be doing more, right? Like the world is in trouble. The world's got major problems. We need, as philosophers, to be addressing those and not having these academic esoteric debates among ourselves, right? And so I think that there is some work, however, being done in philosophy that can be applicable. And one of them I came across because I looked up the Why podcast, right? Weinstein's Why podcast, and I saw one about why people deny obvious truths, right? And so it was specifically, if I can find it here, I'm very sorry. Adrian Barden has this book about why people deny obvious truths, and they had this great conversation about a kind of a hot topic, I think, now in philosophy, which is basically like, how should we put this? Like social epistemology, like how do individuals come to have the beliefs that they do, but how do groups come to have the beliefs that they do, and how do those groups influence the beliefs of the people that are in them, right? And one of the things that they pointed out was just like that I thought was very interesting is that like analytic philosophy for a very long time has been concentrated on like, what is the definition of knowledge, justified true belief. I don't know if you guys know, Edmund Gettier had this famous argument. Do you guys know about this or not?
No.
I'm familiar with it, but
problem?
I'm sure
Okay.
the audience.
Okay, so like I'll go very quickly, but like Edmund Gettier came in and said like, here's an counter example that shows that not everything that is justified true belief is knowledge, and it overturned epistemology for like 50 years, right? Like, I mean, everybody talked about it for 50 years. It supposedly overturned philosophy, epistemology for 2,000 years, and that was the big huge thing or whatever. But ultimately, that's not settling on what knowledge is not going to really affect everyday life all that much, right?
Right. So how do you, but David, I have a question. So how do you get from A to B there? Because I mean, when you from like, let's say the most kind of abstract form of philosophy possible, like metaphysics or epistemology, whatever you want that to be, how do you get from that to something like, libertarianism, right? Where you're talking about specific kind of like political outcomes, the idea of how you, create like a just society. Like, how do you get from like something that I think to some people would just sort of be like, why are we talking about like justified true belief, or why are we talking about like the nature of being, to like my idea or your idea or whoever's idea for how society should work? Like how do you think that should be?
Yeah. So, I mean, I could talk about how I got there. I started
Yeah, that'd be great.
realizing that, okay, so like I started kind of realizing that what was really kind of beneficial was what I would call applied epistemology. So we take what philosophers have discovered about what gets you knowledge and how we get knowledge and all that kind of stuff, right? And we can put into this social epistemology, right? And we start realizing that, we need to start teaching people about this, right? And like this turns me into someone who like really cares about teaching critical thinking and scientific reasoning to my students, right? And not the kind of esoteric, you know, philosophical issues or whatever, because this is something that they can use in their daily life, right? And so I start realizing that there are ways to apply this, but we actually have to apply it. It's not enough to just get students to talk about the esoteric debate and understand what the definition of knowledge is. We've got to start teaching these skills and doing so very, very directly, right? I mean, there's also an easy path to other kind of things, like if you're studying ethics, it's very easy to realize that, like, well, if I'm realizing, debates about what's right and wrong or whatever, we can start doing applied ethics. And then like, so it's all applied epistemology, applied ethics, and we can start like teaching our students how to make ethical decisions. Right? And showing them how to apply it to the real world, not just teach them about the theories. And this is actually like, I mean, when I teach scientific reasoning, I teach a particular method that you can apply to kind of any given situation when you're thinking about a scientific matter. Um, I borrowed it from Ted Schick. He calls it the search method. In my new book, I call it the research method, because I redo what he does just a little bit or whatever. But then I also have a method of ethical reasoning that follows a very similar pattern, and I'm trying to teach my students how to use this in their daily life, right? And so, I mean, I guess that's how you get there, is realizing that. Here's the short answer to your question, Josh. Realizing that what we're doing, these esoteric debates and stuff that we're having, they can be applied. We just have to apply them, and we have to teach our students how to apply them. We have to teach people out in the real world how to apply them. And so we just have to get the gumption to realize that, like, I don't know if gumption is the right word, but to realize that it's okay for us to do that, right? Again, I think this might come back to a kind of ivory tower thing, where a lot of philosophers think that engaging with the public is, um, either not for them, they're not qualified for it, it's beneath them or whatever. And we need to get over that. So no, we really do need to be like trying to reach out. Does that answer your question, Josh? I'm sorry. I feel like I didn't do a very good job there.
Yeah, no, it does. But I wanted to hear you talk more about this idea of libertarianism, which almost strikes me as like a political philosophy idea. But just
Yeah,
like explain
right.
to our listeners like what that is and where it comes from.
Right. So this is a great example of applied philosophy. All right. Um, a philosopher named Ingrid Robbins. Hopefully I'm saying her last name correctly. I'm pretty sure that is correct. And again, I discovered her on Adam Conover's Factually podcast, where I first heard about her book. And so I got the book and read it, or listened to it actually, and then listened to it again. And I'm actually right now I wrote a lecture for my intro class on it. And right now I'm in the middle of publishing like an 11-part series on libertarianism, on my Medium blog. She is a philosopher, and she argues for the thesis that there ought to be a limit on wealth. Right. And by that, she means that society should take steps to try to ensure that no one individual can accumulate more than a certain amount of wealth, not just money, but like wealth. Right. And she actually puts the limit at 10 million. If you said, "Oh, don't think it should be that low. I think it should be 100 million," she would more than likely say, "Great, you think there's a limit. You do think there should be a limit.
Yeah.
Now let's debate about what that limit should be." That's the main
Well,
thing, is that there should
there's
be
a
a limit, and then we
famous
can.
there's a very famous off-color joke that follows the same logic, right?
Which
Do you know it? Okay,
no,
well,
I don't
whatever.
think so.
I'll tell it. Which is, I mean, would you sleep with me for $10? No.
Oh.
Would you sleep with me for $1 billion? Would you sleep with me for $1 billion? Yes. Okay. Well, in that case, we're just negotiating price.
Right.
Anyway.
I got
Yeah.
you. Right. So, but I mean, I mean, I think that it works, right? Like, as
Mm.
long as, I mean, even if you think I think it should be $1 billion, right? There's an old meme that says that, like, once somebody gets $1 billion, we should just, like, erect a park and say, "Congratulations, you won capitalism," and then we take the rest, right? Every penny they earn after $1 billion. It's like, I think $1 billion's way too high, but still, at least you think there's a limit, right?
Mhm.
But she gives a very philosophical argument for why there should be a limit. So society should impose a limit on the amount of money, amount of wealth that any one person can accumulate, right? And it's not just, so we should just tax everything above X amount. Like, that's not, she doesn't think that would actually work. She doesn't think that's very realistic. There are a number of different ways that she thinks that we could accomplish this, and a lot of different kind of things going into one thing. But the kind of argument she gets is just like, first, it's a philosophical argument. A world with limits on wealth is just more just and fair, and justice and fairness are intrinsically good. So we should just shoot for that, right? A more kind of philosophic, like applied philosophy in terms of economics, right? If you look in practice about what happens, people having more up there is why you have less down here. There's not, like, trickle down doesn't work and all that kind of stuff. Like, literally, you are poorer because they are richer. So if you were just self-interested, you should want this to happen, right? Another philosophical argument for, like, they literally do not deserve the wealth that they have, either because it's actually not earned, it's inherited, or it's gotten in incredibly immoral ways. Most of the richest companies in the world, like, there are companies in Germany who are still rich because of the Nazis. They never get the money back, right? And then even in the rare case where they do actually, like, do
I
something
think
to
this
earn
might
it.
be one, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, Mercedes
I
probably
think
is.
I'm wearing
Yeah.
a Mercedes hat for those not watching, but
Yeah,
unfortunately.
that's probably right. But, like, even those who do earn it, they don't do nearly the amount of work that would be necessary to entitle them to the amount of wealth that they have, right? It undermines democracy. So there's a philosophical argument: if you value democracy, like, you can, like, the science shows that it is undermining democracy. So philosophically, if you think democracy is a good thing, right? And then another argument is that it's not possible to solve climate change without limiting wealth. It's not, because as
interesting.
long as they have that wealth, they will use that wealth to protect it. And what protects it is burning fossil fuels and all that kind of stuff. But eliminating wealth will eliminate all the incentive for denialism, and then we'll actually be able to do something about it. So this is, like, climate change used to be, like, my number one issue. It's the thing I cared about more than anything. I now care about libertarianism more, largely because I think she is right that the only way to solve climate change, it is unsolvable until we limit wealth. But we also get all these other benefits from it. There's obviously a lot more good that we could do with the money if we had the money of the rich and we could sell it. Another part of her argument, and this is more empirical, but, like, you can't trust the rich to do it through philanthropy. Like, occasionally they do, but even then they don't do it quite right. And it's not even ultimately their money to begin with. Like, it really is our money. They claim it, but it is our money. And then lastly, you're actually helping the rich by taking their wealth, because the research shows that wealth does not make you happy. It actually makes you abjectly, horribly miserable.
That is
And
super interesting.
yeah, like, it is like one of the examples she uses that I'm using off the top of my head is Walt Disney was miserable. Because here's part of the problem is that when you have that much wealth, no one can truly be your friend. That's, like, that has less wealth than you, because they're constantly just like, "You could change my entire life. Please just give me money, give me
Yeah.
what," right? And they have to isolate themselves. And so they either surround themselves with other rich people who won't ask for their money, or people that they pay to be around them to tell them yes to everything, right? And so it shuts off, like, social dynamics, it shuts off. And there's lots of research of people who gave up enormous amounts of wealth who afterwards are like, "Yeah, I'm glad. I'm so much happier without it," right? Not that you give everything away and live in poverty or whatever, but, like, You don't need $1 billion, right? 10 million's enough. So like, again, I am not doing it justice. Her argument is way more sophisticated, way more well-researched. You can read my Medium blog on it. I'm on part 6 out of 11 or something like that. But read her book, honestly. And it's an audiobook. Get the audiobook, listen to it. It is absolutely fantastic. But I like, you guys were talking about like what philosophical ideas, or asking about what philosophical ideas like the public is engaged in and that kind of stuff, or I'm sorry, that the philosophers are engaging the public with and that kind of stuff, right? I am about to start work. I've sort of already started, but I'm about to start work in earnest on my next great course, which is going to be, I think the title is something like The Great Isms of the Western World. The idea is that like, what are all these different isms that have influenced
Mhm.
with like capitalism and
Yeah, yeah.
theism and that kind of stuff, right? And long story short, I'm doing it all as an excuse to talk about limitarianism at the end. The last lecture will be that limitarianism has not influenced the world, but I think that if we're going to survive as a species, it needs to be the most influential ism of the 21st century.
It's really interesting to me, and I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out how to formulate what I'm trying to ask. But I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, and it ties into everything we've been talking about, that idea of limiting, like capping wealth, because I always think of it in terms of like, I hate the metaphor of like life is a game, because I don't think of it as a game, but you do need to have rules. And if you have this group of people, you have to change the rules. Otherwise, the people can't play the game anymore, right? Like the NFL is constantly tweaking the rules to make sure the game is fair. And if you have these people with all this money, the game's not fair anymore. They can just manipulate the rules however they want. It doesn't really matter if they earned it or not to me. Like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. It breaks
Yep.
society. I think about this stuff constantly. Josh, I think you think about it a lot. We write about this stuff a lot. We cover it a lot. Yet I haven't heard of the term. And I'm wondering, like, why do I know what Jordan Peterson thinks? Right? Like, I know all these things that Jordan Peterson thinks about stuff, but this woman who has this idea and she's articulating something that I think most of America is interested in, but can't, it maybe struggles to defend sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Or even define.
Yeah, or even define. It just feels right. Like, it feels unfair. And so, like, how do we get this woman out here talking about, like, on podcasts, and this idea in the news? I guess we're doing it, Josh. I guess so. We should pat ourselves on the back. But
Yeah.
And invite her on, man. I'm telling you.
I guess that's what we should do. But how does that happen? Like, why does that happen? Like, how come some ideas seem to stay in the philosophical discourse and other ones break through? I guess part of the problem is just the media. I don't know. It's not really.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two things, right? There is a squeaky wheel gets the grease problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where like the reason that you know about Jordan Peterson is because all the stuff he says is so wrong. I'll refrain from profanity. So completely wrong that it needs to be debunked. And so people are like paying attention to it, and you're right to debunk it. Right. And on the flip side, there's also, the media ecosystem is owned by conservatives who want to promote these kinds of ideas. So those are the kinds of ideas that get promoted, right? You're not going to see limitarianism on Fox News or MSNBC or MS now, right? Like you're not going to see it on either one of them, right? And especially limitarianism because, like, I mean, think about it. Who controls the media? Who controls what we see and hear and da da da? All the rich people, right?
Yeah.
So are they going to be promoting the idea that they should have less wealth? If they knew what was in their best interest, they would, but they're not, right? And so that's going to be one of the hardest ideas to even, to be heard, right? But it's so common sense, right? Like, it's even to the case that, like, back in 2014, there was a study that came out that like asked Americans what they think wealth distribution should look like and what they think it actually looks like. And they were like, well, I think it should look like this, but I think it probably actually looks like this. And in reality, it looks like this, right? Like it's just,
right.
It's just ridiculous, right? I have the graphs in my first article on the limitarianism on Medium, right? And it's like, but people thought it should look like this, and it looks like this, right? So intuitively, we think it should be brought, like morally, it should be brought down, right? And like if you were to, this is one of my favorite, like instead of doing tax caps, or like everything after a certain amount is just taken or whatever, right? Which I wouldn't be opposed to if they passed that law. I just don't think it's realistic that we would pass such a thing or whatever. But I think this could get passed if people actually honestly proposed it and didn't let rich people influence the political, system to debunk it. How about a law that just says that the most highly paid person at a company can't make more in a month than the lowest paid person can make in a year?
Yeah, there's all kinds of
Month to year
ways.
ratio, 1 to 12,
It
right?
does
Like,
it does seem like a willpower problem. But the question you just the so when you just mentioned that, like, the rich people, MSNBC, Fox, they're not that different. They're ultimately owned by like mega wealthy. One thing I've been thinking about lately, and I didn't prep you for this one at all, so I don't know. When I look at the conservative side of the political media, or not political media, the conservative politicians, even if I think their beliefs are kind of nuts, I can usually trace back like where those ideas came from to some philosopher, to some thinker. And even though I'm not a conservative, right? I'm very far left. But when I look at like centrist Democrats, like I often can't. Like it's not clear to me like what their philosophy is other than like McKinsey, or something like that. And so I'm curious, I guess, if you were forced to answer, like what philosophy underpins sort of the Democratic Party from like the mid 90s to now? Like, what is it? Like, because we have
I
the
don't.
far left, they're Marxists. You have the far right, and you can trace that back to like Carl Schmitt, and all these like really awful people, or even like religious figures. But a lot of the Democrats, I really can't, and it drives me nuts. And I've just concluded that there isn't one. But I'm curious what you think, if you've thought
There
about this at
might
all.
not be, right? So like part of this might be a result of like the herding cats phenomenon, right? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
it is obvious that like conservative politicians and on the right, they're much better organized in terms of messaging and all that kind of stuff, right? And I think it's just easier to get them in line, right? This is like make everybody believe the same. They all believe it, they'll all repeat it or whatever. And Democrats are much more, on the left are much more free thinkers. And so it's really harder to get them to all agree on something. So you can't trace it back to one person. It's the result of them all talking to themselves, and the policy that comes out, or the doctrine, or whatever it is, right? The platform that comes out is a result of this conversation they're all having with themselves. So it's not easy to just trace it back to one,
Mm-hmm.
one or two or three individuals. That's kind of again, you didn't prep me for this, but that's kind of
Yeah,
my
that makes
instinctive
sense.
kind of reaction to that question.
Yeah. All right, I
Um,
want to shift here
but I
to
would love it if it would just go straight back to libertarianism, right?
yeah. There we go. There we go.
Right.
All right, I want to talk. We got to talk about AI a bit, because I think consciousness, personhood. I mean, these are right in the metaphysical wheelhouse, and it's kind of wild to me that, like, again, you have philosophers who've been asking these questions for 3,000 years, but I'm supposed to believe like Jensen Huang when he tells me, like the CEO of NVIDIA, or Sam Altman, and they tell me like what AI can be and personhood and all these things. So I guess the way I want to start this is, what do you think the right questions we should be asking about AI are? What are the important things we need to be sorting?
So I'd be derelict if I did not think that the question of consciousness is at least important, right? This would be, if I did not say this, this would be contrary to a lot of my previous writings, because um, if we do develop, like, whether AI is conscious is a really important question, because if it is, and we just make it do all of our dirty work, right? Like, then we're just right back to slavery. Like, if it's a
Mm,
person and it feels things and we're just making it do all this crap, we're right back to enslaving conscious individuals, and right, like we're right back to the same problem. That said, I think people who are suggesting that LLMs are conscious are grossly overestimating what's going on there.
mm,
However, on the flip side, I also think some of the arguments against it aren't that great. So, like, the conclusion of the argument is true, but the arguments to get there aren't exactly the best. And we can talk more about that if you want to. Um, so, but also, I think a lot more important philosophical problems or questions are about what it does to human agency, what it does to this is more of a kind of, this is a scientific and philosophical question, but like what it's doing to our cognitive capacities, right? Like, we're forgetting how to think for ourselves, right?
Mm.
Because we're farming it all out to AI. And what it's doing to the educational system and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Those kind of questions. And obviously questions about like, these are more practical questions, but how do we mitigate it? Like, how do we get my students to not use AI in class?
Yeah.
Right. Which unfortunately now is just like, they have to handwrite everything, which sucks, right?
Oh,
Sucks for them,
so
sucks for
that's
me, but
yeah. Back to blue
but,
books.
yep.
Yeah.
And trying to think of but like how it's affecting, and then like obviously philosophical questions about its ethical use, right? So and there's all kinds of questions there about everything from faking political ads to Grok was like creating naked images of people without their consent and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff at one point, right? Like there's those kind of ethical questions, although those aren't hard to answer. That's immoral, right? Like
Yeah.
that's easy. But like there's kind of more complicated ethical questions about its use and that kind of stuff, right? And I think ethical questions about its use in research are going to be coming up. I use it for research. I don't use it to write my papers, but I use it for to help me find, a paper on something. It's a lot more
Mhm.
efficient at going through Google Scholar and that kind of stuff to
Yeah.
find articles that I need when I'm writing or whatever, right? I think that's perfectly fine, but there's other problems. Um, so all of those kinds of but what I'm more of an expert is the consciousness stuff. So if you want to talk more about that, we
Yeah,
can
I
do that.
do.
But
I definitely do. I mean, I'm curious. Yeah, just what do you think? I mean, do you think is consciousness like on the is it on the table? I mean, I guess yeah, is consciousness on the table?
so for LLMs or for AI?
Let's say both. Let's say for LLMs, and then let's say we could take AI and put it in like a robot, so we have androids.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the androids first. All right.
Yeah.
So we'll do a little sci-fi here, right?
Yeah.
So we mentioned this before we were on the air, right? In my sci-fi science fiction philosophy course for great courses, I have 24 lectures where I talk about different pieces of science fiction. By pieces of science fiction, I mean movies and television shows. And one of them we talk about is Spielberg / Kubrick's AI artificial intelligence, which has Haley Joel Osment as little AI named David, not little AI, he's a boy named David.
Yeah.
And so what we have there is a machine that acts just like a person, like in almost every practical way, right? He doesn't eat, but like kind of other than that, he emotes and behaves and prints on his mother and all that kind of stuff, just like a regular person, right?
Mhm.
If we get to that point, we are not there yet. If we get to that point, I think we have to conclude that they are minded, that they are conscious, that they have emotions and feelings and and we have to treat them appropriately. We cannot just enslave them and assume that there's no mind there. That would again just get us right back to slavery, right? So I think that is unquestionable. And the most basic argument against it is, yeah, but they don't have brains. We have a brain, so we have minds. They don't have brains, so they can't have minds. This is what we might call speciesism, right? Like, this is a speciesist argument. The idea that only the kind of brain that we have is capable of mentation, is capable of producing a mind, right? We have no evidence of that. We know that this is sufficient for mentation, but we don't know it's necessary. We do not know that this is the only kind of thing that can produce a mind. And in fact, I think we could be easily convinced that it's not if we one day met aliens, right? Which we have not yet, by the way. I do want to talk more about how misunderstandings of science are related to what we're talking about as well. But like, we have not, but if we did one day meet aliens and they talk like us and they could communicate and do math and all this kind of stuff or whatever, but their brains were completely different. They were made differently, or they were made of different material. They were silicon based rather than carbon based. We would not, oh, but they don't have a mind because they don't have our kind of brain. No, of course not. Their behavior would be sufficient to justifiably conclude that they have minds, right? This is actually a large part of why I think you, Joe, and you, Josh, have minds, is because you behave basically like me, right?
Right.
And if you were to go, well, I know I behave like you, but zip, and you showed me a positronic brain, right? I would not go, well, now I don't think you're minded, right? Like,
Right.
no, because you behave like you do. That's why you're minded. So if an android ever behaves like what we do, we should conclude that it's minded. Now, that said, LLMs are not there yet. All right. LLMs do not behave like David from AI. They are not exemplifying the kind of behavior that humans really do. Right. You can hold a conversation with them for a long while, and it looks a lot like a human conversation. But there are certain giveaways whenever you talk to them that you can definitely tell that you're talking to an AI. And there's certain mistakes that they make that a human would not make. Right. Like one of the classic examples is if you ask, I need to wash my car. The car wash is a quarter mile away. Should I drive my car or walk? Right. And it depends on how you ask the question. Sometimes it will say, well, walking's more efficient, it's better for the environment, so walk. Right. And then if you ask the question a different way, it's like, well, you should take your car, because if you don't take your car, you can't wash it. Right. But like humans usually wouldn't make that, that kind of mistake, or wouldn't matter the way you ask the question. Right. And so this is it's like, I mean, some people would ask like, but does LLMs pass the Turing test? Right. And in a certain kind of way, it depends on what you mean by the Turing test. So like the Turing test in its original conceptualization by Alan Turing was just like, can it fool a person in like a 10-minute conversation or whatever? Like, well, it could probably do that. But I don't think that is sufficient to prove mindedness. Like that's not long enough. That's not enough test time, right? And people could be ignorant, easily fooled, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
What I think is the more interesting debate is like when John Searle has like the Chinese room argument, right? And he imagines this room where somebody's inside with a big book and somebody's slipping, pieces of paper inside and outside. They're in Chinese and da-da-da-da. And they fool a native Chinese speaker into thinking that the person inside the room speaks Chinese, right? That's a lot more grandiose. That's much more grandiose than the Turing test. That is like, no, you can conversate for as long as you want in a way that is completely indistinguishable from the way a regular person talks. That's not what LLMs do. So we're not there yet. That's kind of where I think that and let me put it this way, there's different kinds of mindedness, right? So if LLMs do one day get to the point where they can hold a conversation and you literally just cannot tell the difference between talking to a regular individual or whatever, I think I would be willing to at least say that they understand language, right? And by understand language, I mean, like, there's something it's like to understand language. There's something it's like to understand what words mean, right? That's kind of ineffable. That's hard to like put words into, like what the color red looks like, right? I would be kind of willing to ascribe that particular mental property to an LLM that could do that. Again, I don't think LLM's doing that yet, but that would be different than saying it feels emotion. Right. That's a different aspect of mentality, right? Or that it's hungry or something like that, right? So that said, I think here's one of the bad arguments, I think, for thinking that LLMs are not conscious. So one of the arguments I've seen is that, well, LLMs can't be conscious because we've looked at what they do and they're not doing what I'm doing whenever I form language, right? So like, what large language models do is you give them a question and then they run a bunch of statistics. They look at a big database and they figure out statistically what word would most likely come next. And then given what word they just put down, statistically what word would most likely come next, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And that's what they do. Well, that's not what I'm doing when I'm talking. So it can't be that they understand language, right? I think this is kind of wrong-headed in two ways. One, it might not actually be that different from what you're doing when you understand language. Now you would say, yeah, but I internally, I kind of know what's going on in my head when I'm understanding language and forming sentences, and it's not statistical evaluation. It's like, well, subjectively, I know that's what it feels like, but your brain does a lot of things that you are not consciously aware of, right? As a very simplistic example, I'll often make this example when I'm teaching metaphysics at King's in class, is I'll throw something at them and they'll instinctively catch it, right? And I'll be like, did you just do calculus? Did you just do, right? Like, did you do a bunch of whole complicated math? And they're like, no, of course not. Yeah, you did, because you had nowhere to put your hands, where to, right? Like your brain did it without you realizing it, right? So we don't fully understand what's going on inside our brain when we form language. So it's entirely possible that what our brain does is not that dissimilar from statistical analysis on large data sets to figure out what word comes next, right?
So
and
one
in
great,
fact,
I just wanted to ask a question. Like one great fictional depiction of an AI that is embodied is Data in Star Trek, right? Next Generation.
Mhm.
I know one thing we wanted to kind of touch on today was
Yes.
not just
Right.
sci-fi depictions of AI, but specifically, I know Joe is really interested in getting into the Star Trek series, and we know that
Yeah.
you're a
Right.
fan of Star Trek as well, David. Now, I'm a big fan of Next Generation. I like watch the episodes every now and then. I really like the movies that came out of TNG specifically, although of the original series also is great. But as you know, for somebody like Joe who tragically has never really watched Star Trek, David, I mean, how would you recommend that he get into it? I mean, would you start from episode one, or would you go? Is there a way to do it chronologically? You think? How would you?
Yeah. Right. So, let me finish my thought, and then I'll come right back to start, and
Okay.
I'll relate it to data
Yeah.
here. Right. So,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
data is doing the statistical analysis thing to come out with his language, right? I'm willing to say that he understands language, even if I don't think that that's what's going on inside my head. If Ladder Wittgenstein is right, maybe statistical analysis and figuring out like language games, maybe that is kind of what's going on inside my brain as I'm trying to figure out things to say, right? Um, sorry. Um, but in addition, this idea that in order to understand language, data has got to do his data's brain is going to do what my brain does. Otherwise, he can't understand language. Doesn't match up to what I'm doing, then he can't do it. Well, that's another kind of speciesist argument, right? That's akin to saying his brain's got to be made out of the same thing that mine is, otherwise he can't think, right?
Mhm.
The person who admits it, no, it could be made of something different, but then goes on to say, but it has to be doing exactly what my brain is doing. Otherwise, he can't think, right? I'm not quite sure that's the case. We know this is sufficient, may not be necessary, right?
Right.
Um, so, but when we bring up data, right, and we have this, so we're now into pop culture, territory here. If we're going to watch Star Trek, how do we get into it? What order do we do it in, right? Um, I think you're right, Josh. TNG is the best. It is the best series of all of them. Um, that said, the first season's a little rough. Maybe, well, I don't know. One of two things: either start with TNG, go straight through, right? Um, and then maybe go to TOS, and then, or hear me out on this: do TNG, and then as a prequel, go back to Strange New Worlds, which is the new one that's coming out, and have that lead into
Hmm.
TOS. That could
Interesting.
be
When you say
good,
TOS, you
right?
mean the
Right.
original series? Is
The
that what
original
we're? Is
series,
that
the original
okay?
series.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because I
sorry,
think
you're not
there's
up
a
on
way
the
you could do it
lingo. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because just hearing you talk about it, David, there's a way you could do it chronologically within the universe, where I guess you would start with like Wrath of Khan, because I think that actually starts like in the 90s if you like think about his chronology, and then you do the movie, like the First Contact movie, and then you go into like the series that precede the original series. Like you could do it chronologically. I'm not sure if anybody really tries to do
Oh
it that
yeah.
way.
Well, if you
Yeah,
did
like
chronologically, though, if you did chronologically, you start with Enterprise, or technically you do First Contact and then Enterprise, right? Like that's a little weird.
if you
But
wanted to
that would not,
integrate the movies, and if you really wanted to go crazy, you could do the episodes where they travel back in time to like the 19th century,
right? You could really get into it,
and
right? Right.
then
Yeah.
yeah,
So, but I'm not for chronological. For example, I have a whole article on Psychology Today, my blog on pop culture and psychology, about how to watch Star Wars. And the appropriate order is not chronological, and it's not release order either. The appropriate order is 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6. And if you're adult, you start with row 1 and then 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 6. And I could go on all day about why that is the correct order. So I am perfectly fine with going TNG, and then we'll watch Strange New Worlds, then watch the original series, then you can kind of figure out where to go from there. Um, that's my suggestion. Start with TNG. Another possibility would be to look up a list of all the best TNG episodes in release order. And so you could kind of skip past some of the bad ones. And like, I think you should skip the third episode. I think it's the third episode, Matter of Honor. I think that's what it's called.
is
Why
that
not
like the
start with the
racist
original
one?
series?
Yeah.
I'm curious. Why not start with the original series? Is it just like
It's
dated?
Yeah, it's dated. It's very campy, which some people think is part of its charm. And that's fine. You like the campiness or whatever of it. I just think if you were in the 90s, yeah, if you were used to 90s cinemas, go watch the original. We're so far removed from it, the episodes are too slow and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think you get into it. I think you give up pretty early if you started with the original series.
And Next Generation is campy, but not to that degree. And it's just a lot more like it's just a lot more. I think easy. It's just easier to follow.
Yeah, it's easier to
Uh,
follow. It's more
yeah.
exciting. There's, like there's episodes of the third season of the original series I can't even watch. Like the children, well, the one with the children shall lead them or whatever. Like I can't even watch it. Um, there's some other ones in that final season or whatever, but like season 1 and 2 are really good. But again, they're still a little dated or whatever. So,
There's a
um,
funny family tie to the very first episode ever of Star Trek. So the only thing I know about Star Trek or not the only thing, but one of the few things I know is that in the very first episode, the captain was Jeffrey Hunter. Okay.
uh-huh,
It wasn't, they changed it right away after the pilot. Okay. I
right.
didn't know who Jeffrey Hunter was. Okay. But then I was talking to my dad and he was saying, my parents were going to name me Joe, but then there was this really big actor who came along named Jeffrey Hunter and they changed their minds and they named me Jeff after Jeffrey Hunter. And shout out to you, Dad. I love you. My dad always tells me how he hates his name. He hates the name Jeff. And so, and that's my tie to Star Trek is this guy, Jeffrey Hunter, who was only in the pilot. I think he might have been in like some Westerns, but that was really it. Really shooting star. That was it. And,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that's
he was a
that.
big star at the time. He was a big
Yeah.
star when TOS was originally coming out, right? So that's why Roddenberry wanted him. But it just didn't. I forget the whole. There's lots of literature that's like talks about why it didn't quite work out or whatever. But yeah,
I
but
wanted to ask
yeah,
you another question, and then we could wrap up here, which is just in terms of like, so sometimes I'll meet people and they're like interested in philosophy, but they don't really know where to begin, right? They're not going back to college. What do you tell people that are like philosophy curious? Like, where do you start? Like, what are some books that are good entry level or intro that you just want to start thinking about stuff? And obviously, it depends on like maybe their specific interests, but there's like generally speaking, are there some books to recommend to people who want to like start thinking?
yeah. So like, I mean, there's plenty of introduction to philosophy textbooks out there, right?
Mhm.
Ted Schick's Doing Philosophy, who I borrow a lot from Schick. I've taught out of his Thinking About Weird Things book for a very long time. As intro books go, I think Doing Philosophy by Ted Schick, I'm pretty sure that's the name. Is it right here? Right here? No, I'm sorry, it's at the office. But I think it's one of the best intro textbooks out there. So if you're just looking for intro textbook, that's a really good way to go. There's also some like, I think it's Oxford or Rutledge has, maybe both of them have like short introduction series. And so you can
Mhm.
just do short introduction to philosophy. And then you could also do short introduction to specific areas,
Yeah.
epistemology, metaphysics, et cetera, right? Um, I'll be self-serving here. And
Yeah. Go for it.
if you don't have that kind of time and you want a good, like an audio book or whatever to listen to kind of understand some of the big philosophical questions, take my
Yeah.
course, Big Questions, the big questions of philosophy off of great courses. Right.
Highly
And
recommend.
yeah, thank you. I mean, like, it really is a launching point. Like I talk about all the big questions, and whatever question you have, whatever one that you think is most important that we talk about there, you can go and do a deeper dive. And I literally, like in my literature and stuff on with the course, right? There's a whole bunch of recommended readings in it, and you can do a deeper dive and go into it that way. If you're talking about like, and this gets me to the thing I wanted to talk about, uh, if who wants to get into thinking, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
A great introductory book, again, Ted Schick's How to Think About Weird Things. I taught out of it for about 15 years. It is remarkable. It is very, very good. Um, my new book, How, Why, and When to Think Scientifically, is modeled after its approach. It's just goes into a lot more depth
Yeah.
in a lot of different things. And I expand on his search method a little bit. I make the acronym work a little bit better. I do some other things like that. Um, but to me, this is one of my big public outreach things. I think one of the most important things, so we're going back to the beginning of the interview, like what do
Yeah.
philosophers need to do to reach out to the public? One of the biggest things that we can do is teach people how to think
Hmm.
reasonably and logically and care about evidence. Like not only learn how to do it, but to care about it, right? To care about evidence, care about reasoning, care about science, care about logic, and understand it properly and be able to apply it properly. Because logic, which is the science of reasoning, is a subdiscipline in philosophy. Nobody knows how to understand arguments and reasoning better than philosophers.
Hmm.
And so we need to be doing more of that, teaching people how to reason effectively. That is the biggest goal of the How, Why, and When to Think Scientifically book. It's really a book about how to think critically. I think critical thinking and scientific thinking are one and the same thing. It was designed for a science course, so I called it How to Think Scientifically. But it is a critical thinking book. It is a how do you think critically about the world. And if Bertrand Russell said, he gave 3 rules about how we should treat authority. He said that if all the authorities are agreed, the layperson would be wise to, like, the layperson can't know better. I think they'd be actually wise to agree with them. But if all the authorities are agreed, like all the experts are agreed, I should say, then the wise layperson would not disagree with them, right? If they're divided on a topic, if like half the experts say one thing, half the experts say, then the wise layperson would say, well, then I don't know, right? And the same thing if all the experts are agreed that there's not enough information to settle the matter, the wise person would definitely say, oh, I definitely don't know.
I don't know.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know, but you're right. So, and he said that if people just accepted those 3 rules, the entire world would change. The entire world would be different if people just understood how to appropriately appeal to expertise.
Well, isn't that what they say, that the philosophers have hitherto only interpreted the world? The point is to change it.
Yeah, right.
Very different philosophy at that point. But I think,
right,
David, unless there's more you want to add, I think we've done an hour. This was incredibly educational. I feel like I learned a ton.
Oh yeah. So let me finish the last point. Right. So what I meant was,
sure.
Russell said that would change the world. I think everyone learning to think critically would change the world. If everyone understood how scientific reasoning works, how scientific consensus is reached, the world would be an entirely different place. And so start with some kind of critical thinking book, I guess, is ultimately what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That sounds great. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, this was really, really great.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Thanks for having me, guys.